Let's get started. This is the participant briefing for the 2025 edition of the Dragon's Back race. My name is Shane Ohly. I'm the Event Director of the Dragon's Back race, and I am very much looking forward to welcoming everybody to Conway on Sunday the 31st of August, just a few weeks away. Before you come, why don't you reflect on why you're going to be at the race? Certainly, if it wasn't hard, anybody would be able to do it. If it wasn't hard, you wouldn't form those lifelong memories, those new friendships, and come away from the event with potentially an outstanding sense of accomplishment and satisfaction. I know an event like the Dragon's Back race asks a lot of the people who enter, and I want to reassure you that we, the team at Aria Events, ask an equal amount of ourselves in delivering the event for you. So I am super excited about what lies ahead of you. Almost every word that I say here applies equally to the Dragon's Back and the Hatchling. So please listen carefully and let's get going. So the first thing I want to say is my apologies if this briefing feels a little heavy-handed. I think once you come to the event and you see the complexity for yourself, you'll understand why I'm going to get into these details. There are many moving parts at the Dragon's Back race. Logistics and safety influence everything that we do, and the majority of this briefing kind of boils back down to logistics and safety considerations. So I intend to explain much of the kind of functional, factual approach to delivering the event, how we interpret and deal with the rules and our management style of the race now, so we can get this out of the way. So I want to be able to concentrate on giving you an absolutely brilliant experience of the event, and hopefully we never have to think about the majority of what we talk about over the next probably 45 minutes or so. It also allows you to just focus on having a brilliant time running the length of Wales. And if you do think, oh, I'm not sure what that means, or what does, can you clarify this? You've got a chance to get in touch before the event, and I hope that you'll have a really good sense of the kind of ethos and culture that we have at Aria Events and you can expect to experience at the Dragon's Back race. So hopefully you know what you're letting yourself in for. So the nature of the challenge, I feel very passionately that you only get true adventure when the outcome is uncertain, perhaps unknown. Mix into that a little bit of jeopardy, and the jeopardy might come from the physical demands of the race, potentially even a sense of risk at times. You'll all be going across Criccoch on the Snowdon Horseshoe. The Dragon's Back race is not just about running. You need to be a really outstanding all-rounder to do well at this event. So you need to be competent at running and hiking in a mix of really quite challenging and technical terrain. But at the same time, they're long sections of very runnable tracks and trails. You need to look after your own nutrition and hydration, and you have to deal with the realities of camp life. Personal admin is certainly a concept that you will know well by the end of the race. The Dragon's Back's tough. I mean, there's no other way of describing it. That means that nobody, and I do mean nobody, will start this race with any certainty that they'll finish, and that is the essence of adventure. So in this briefing, what I am not going to do is get into all the nitty-gritty of the event details that are clearly described on the website. So please, if you've got questions about what time registration opens, where do you park your car, read the information on the website, and if you're still uncertain, get in touch with us. We're really happy to talk to any of our participants, so you can get in touch by email, by phone, by live chat, and we'll be happy to clarify anything for you in advance of the event. So I'd like you to understand my kind of hierarchy of priorities. So safety is my number one priority always. And actually I prioritise the safety of the event team over the safety of the participants. Followed very quickly behind that is fluid logistics. And again, as you'll see when you get to the event, there are a lot of moving parts, and I always need to be mindful of the ongoing logistics of the event. When I think about safety, particularly of the event team members, I'm thinking about our catering team handling boiling water at 3 a.m. in the morning. I think about our van drivers being able to drive safely, having had sufficient rest. I think about our electrician dealing with 125 amps of power in a wet, rainy field. I want to be certain that our event control team and our response team can respond effectively to an SOS button press at 9 p.m. on day 5. And always, my golden test for safety is whether our event team can drive home safely, i.e. not exhausted, to their families at the end of the event. It is not acceptable for our volunteers or even our professional staff to work 24-hour shifts, etc., etc. All of these considerations allow us to deliver an absolutely fantastic event for the participants. However, I want to be really clear in terms of my style that if you fall outside of our logistical plan, which is essentially defined by cut-offs and course closures, then you may be retired from the event. Please don't think, I'm only a few minutes late. Sadly, I have retired people from the event for being seconds late and just a few kilometres from the finish on the last day. And if that's what's required to maintain the operations and the logistics of the event, that is what I will do. So the rules are about maximising collective safety, both of yours, your safety of the participants, and the event team who particularly are deployed to the course. Have the same approach to the application of the rules, and that is fairness to everybody taking part means that the rules of the event will be applied blindly regardless of whether you are first or last. And I'll add to that as well, they will be applied regardless of whether you are my friend or you're unknown to me. It's your responsibility to know the rules. There are quite a lot of them. They are pretty common sense. Anybody who's done more than a few races or well-organised races will recognise these are very normal rules. If you want to clarify any of the rules, the only people who can do that are the senior event teams. So this is me as the event director, operations director, our course manager, essentially our race director. But I'm going to highlight a few here, which are the ones that crop up most often. So first of all, you are not allowed external assistance, which is not available to everybody. So that means friends and family, if they do meet you on the course, for sure they can clap, give you a cheer, wish you well, but they cannot give you anything, take anything, provide any support. But you can go into a pub or a shop because that's available to everybody. Excuse me. Please follow the mandatory route when it's mandatory. Don't cut corners. There will be kit checks every day. If you fail a kit check, you will need to fix that, and you will not be able to start the race until you have resolved whatever the problem is in kit check. So the penalty is the time that you waste as you go to the info point or you search for a missing item and all of those things. If you do lose something, come to us and ask for help. We will help you. We want you to have a great time. We want you to finish the race. Generally, we are very supportive. A good rule of thumb is if you come to us with a problem, such as I've lost my head torch, or I think I might have not followed the route here, we will treat that sympathetically and help you. If we discover that you don't have your head torch, or we discover that you have cut the corner on the race, then we treat it differently. A real common one for us is not to fold or cut your race numbers, so we will be looking out for that. Disqualifications are really rare. I mean, it happens maybe once a year, something like that. You need to do something pretty serious. So the three things that will likely get you disqualified is dishonesty, cheating, and any kind of aggression or rudeness to the event team. Those are the really obvious ones. So If something happens out on the course and you think there might be a rule infringement, potentially some kind of disciplinary action from the event, please don't ask the volunteer event team about this, that, or the other, because they don't have the authority to make a decision, and they might not know all the details. So it is very likely that the issue won't be dealt with until you get to the finish. We'll always investigate any kind of rule infringement. We don't make decisions without hearing your side of the story. So I hope that is helpful. Mandatory kit. I'm not going to get into lots of details here because it is all very clearly described on the website. What I would say, it is about safety. The mandatory kit is the minimum recommended kit. I have quite a high threshold as a race organiser for allowing our participants to go on the course in poor weather, and I don't want to be organising events for the lowest common denominator. So that minimum and mandatory kit is really important for giving us the confidence as race organisers that you can continue during poor weather or potentially evacuate from the course during extreme weather. I'm just going to highlight some common mistakes. The synthetic layer. So it's really simple. Is it synthetic? Does it weigh more than 300 grams? Is it spare? Ask yourself the 3 questions. Waterproofs. We often see people turning up that waterproofs that aren't waterproof, so they don't have taped seams. People wearing their spare layer at the start. If you're wearing it, it ain't spare. Not having a real compass. Yeah, those are just a few. So I would just add to this as well for moving on that your overnight dry bag has to be can be a maximum weight of 15 kilograms and a maximum size of 59 litres. It's an Autoliv dry bag only, support point dry bag, 2.5 kilograms, 10 litre max size, Autoliv dry bag only. We have calibrated weighing scales at registration. There is no leniency. If it's over 15 kilograms, then it's over 15 kilograms. And as you hopefully got a sense from the rules, we just apply the rules to everybody in all the situations. So it will be the same for everybody. Right, I'm going to talk a little bit about the route now. So there are 2 different routes shown on the event map, the paper map, and also the Avenza app. I'd highly recommend that you download that Avenza app before the event, and you'll get an email with the link in to do that. So the recommended route is shown in yellow. The recommended route follows the obvious paths. It follows line features like walls, so that it's harder to make navigational errors. There are a few places where you can cut a corner or take a slightly faster line, but the terrain will be more challenging, and or that it will be harder to navigate and execute that kind of maneuver. I think if you took every possible racing line option across the whole route, you might be 15 or 20 minutes quicker. So there's not much time to be saved. Our recommendation is you follow the recommended route. It is the easiest way to complete the event. The mandatory route is shown in orange. It's pretty self-explanatory. You need to follow that route precisely. The mandatory route always goes to crossing points at walls and fences. So if you find yourself climbing over a wall or a fence, you have gone wrong. I might just add there's one famous wall that rather than crossing, you need to crawl through a purpose-made hole, which is quite good fun on day 2. It is our intention not to place any directional arrows or way marking at the race. It's a self-navigated race. We are aware of some newly fallen trees on day 3, and there might be a slight, I say there's no intention, there might be a slight deviation marked around a path that's blocked. It's a tiny couple 100-metre deviation off the route, but essentially we are expecting you to self-navigate. A combination of map and compass and GPX, either on your phone or on your watch, is definitely the best and most common way to navigate. If you do make an error, we always advise you to return to the route at the place you made the error. That's always the best. So this is, an error following the mandatory route. it is unlikely we will penalise anyone if they make an honest mistake and they return back to the same place where they made the error to rejoin the route. If you don't follow the mandatory route, you will be penalised, and that is because I do not want someone who is maybe moving a little slower but ensuring they navigate carefully to be penalised for a participant who is maybe running a bit more carelessly or carefree, but isn't following the mandatory route. Right, on the map there are various locations marked support points. There is one support point each day, and this is where you'll be able to get access to your support point bag, and there'll be a pretty significant presence of our event team there. There'll be loos there as well, and there's always a medic at that location. Checkpoints. So there is nothing on the ground to define a checkpoint. They're all virtual, and I'm going to come back to checkpoints in a bit more detail later on. There is the water point. That's like a light touch support point where you don't get access to your dry bag, but you can refill your water bottles at that location. Also on the map there are guidance times and cut-off times. So a guidance time gives you an indication of whether you are ahead of our schedule to finish before 10 p.m. A cut-off time is an absolute, and if you arrive at that location after the cut-off time, you will be retired. So we also reserve the right to make any guidance time a cut-off time at our discretion, and very occasionally with a very slow moving participant we will intercept them on the course, and we might retire them at a where it has a guidance time. Right, the map you get at registration. The entire map is mandatory kit, so do not cut it up. Put it in your bag and ideally use it to navigate if you can use a map and compass to navigate. The GPX can be downloaded from the website in advance, and we'll also email you a link to it before the event. Right, so we provide recommended and mandatory start times to participants. The number one reason participants fail to make a cut-off time is that they start later than is appropriate. So if you think you're in the back 10% of the runners, or perhaps maybe a bit quicker but you've picked up an injury, our recommendation is to start at 6 a.m. each day, and the cut-off times are based on a 6 a.m. start, 10 p.m. finish, and they are worked out roughly evenly through the day based on over a decade's worth of data, so they're very accurate. We will mandate that the faster runners start after 8 a.m. Generally speaking, that's about the top 10, and that is so they do not get in front of our logistics. On day one, there is a mass start for everybody at 6 a.m. And then on day 6, we reserve the right to have a chasing start. So if the leaders are within 1 hour of each other, we will start them in time order. So the first person across the line is the overall winner of the event. We will advise any of the leading runners about that. So when you leave Conway Castle on day 1, your race time, chip time, starts as you leave the gift shop. Isn't it fantastic that Dragon's Back race starts as you leave Conway Castle gift shop? It always tickles me that. So, but bear in mind the cut-offs and course closure is based on clock time. So we've changed the start through Conway, so you're no longer going along the town walls for the first 500-600 meters, but you're actually straight onto the streets. This will create a faster start, and it'll just mean that the slower runners probably have 10 more minutes to finish day 1 within the cut-offs, and I hope everyone agrees that's the right thing to do. If you really want to walk along the town walls and get a sense of the castle, do that on the Sunday. Okay, talking about race timing and checkpoints. So the first thing to say here is this picture of Sabrina Vergi from a couple of years ago at the Dragon's Back. She is visiting one of our checkpoints that has a physical marker to define that checkpoint. That is no longer the case. There are no physical marks to define the checkpoints on the course, and everything is done with geofencing once you're on the course. So your GPS tracker, it does three things. There's an emergency alert function, and I'll come back to that in a minute. It provides precise chip timing at the start and finish each day as you physically pass a chip reader. Then it provides your split times and your kind of live location via GPS. So that's at each checkpoint, support points, water points. The chip timing is 100% independent to the GPS functionality. They have their own circuitry and their own batteries, so they work independently of each other. In terms of the geofencing of checkpoints, the tracker knows where you are. So we have made the geofences as tight as possible around things like this trig point on the course. So the only way you can be absolutely certain that you have gone to the defined checkpoints is by touching the cairn or the mountain summit. The geofence is tight, it's a few meters. If you're not certain you're in the right place, what I would recommend you do is open the Event app, look at your location live, and it's on the race map so you can see precisely where you are. Yeah, I think that covers those points. So cut-offs. I've already mentioned a little bit about this, but they are based on a 6 a.m. start time and a 10 p.m. closure time. They're based on how many years? 13 years of data of runners through the Dragon's Back, so they're really accurate. They will be enforced to the seconds, and there is essentially no excuse for lateness. It's important to remember that the cut-off times are the time that you leave the checkpoint, not arrive at the checkpoint. Very occasionally, there are extraordinary situations where we might allow somebody to go through a cut-off, even if the cut-off time has passed. Almost universally, that is when they have stopped to assist another runner or even a member of the public in an emergency. I'm not guaranteeing that, because if it's going to impact our logistical and safety plan, even if you have done the right thing to help somebody, we might not be able to allow you to go through, but we'll certainly do our very best to make it happen. An emergency, I need to be clear about what an emergency means here. So it means something serious. I'm going to talk about emergencies later on, but the important thing for you to note is kind of arriving late because you've been walking with your mate who's tired or maybe has a minor injury. That is not an emergency. That is a choice you have made, and you will both be timed out. Retirements. So you can retire at the support point, and we will provide onward transport from that location. And that will take you back to the overnight camp. That onward transport is always secondary to supporting the runners who are still in the race. So sometimes our logistical capacity is ultimately limited, and ensuring that the ongoing logistics for the runners on the full course remains solid, that takes the priority. So if you're retiring at a support point, we will get you back, but you might have to wait a couple of hours on occasions. There is no such thing as retiring on the course. So the only assistance that we offer on the course is in the case of true emergencies, when we deploy a response team to provide assistance. Just going to talk briefly about the difference between the hatchling and the full course. So for the hatchling, you will have on days 2 to 6 the choice to be inserted at the halfway point, essentially the halfway, which will either be usually the support point, occasionally the water point, but we can insert you at this point on the course, and you can then carry on and do the second half of the day. Alternatively, you can start at the start and then finish at the support or water point, whichever is defined for that day. The hatchling is really hard, so let's be clear about this. The Dragon's Back is bonkers hard. The hatchling is really, really hard. If it was in any other context other than the Dragon's Back, the hatchling would be one of the toughest races in the world in its own right. Depending on the options, you'll do something like between 183 or 214 kilometres to complete the hatchling. That's the full half days. To get a result on the hatchling, you must visit at least one checkpoint. So, for example, you can't start at the support point, walk for an hour, decide you need to retire. That, if you haven't actually been to a checkpoint, you won't get a kind of hatchling result. On day one, there are some runners who are intending to do the hatchling from the word go. So everyone starts from Conway Castle on day one. There's no insertion option. And then you have a choice of where you can retire, and that's either in Ogwyn or at Penny Pass. Please bear in mind that there is a constraint to the logistics that support the hatchling. There are only so many seats on the MPVs and the buses. We do hire in buses to support the logistics. Please, if you want to go on the hatchling, go to the info point in the main marquee the night before, as early as possible, and make it clear which option you would like to do. And we will do our level best to make sure that happens. I don't think we have not managed to support everybody's choices yet, but we're not quite guaranteeing it because of the challenges of the logistics. Right, let's move on. Okay, I'm going to talk about your GPS tracking. So I think it's important you understand how the GPS trackers work. So they receive their data, your location, from the satellite. So the tracker, the unit kind of on your shoulder, always knows where it is. But they send that data over the GSM or 2G phone network. So there needs to be just a smidge of phone reception for the tracker to send out that data. Often it will send data when it's impossible to make a phone call because the reception is so weak. If there's absolutely no phone reception, the tracker will buffer its data, it saves up the data, and then it will send it in a burst once it gets reception. And this is why you sometimes see a tracker staying still and you get that sleep symbol, and then it suddenly jumps forward. Now, if you have a particularly nervous partner or parent who might worry about a tracker becoming stationary, perhaps you could explain this to them, because every year across the business we'll have a well-meaning friend or family member who phones the police, asks for mountain rescue because their partner, friend, family member, their tracker has stopped moving. It'd be good to avoid that. Again, if you have a particularly nervous friend, family member you want to give some reassurance, I'm very happy for you to provide the event control phone number to them, which you will get at registration. I think the other important point to reiterate is that the SOS alert button on the tracker will often work when you cannot make a phone call. So there is a kind of function for that tracker when you can't make a phone call. Please always be conscious that our event control team are watching you. Often the wider event team are certainly interested in what you're doing. If you are kind of making a decision to retire and you're heading to a road, but you don't have mobile phone reception, we'll see your tracker moving in all likelihood, and we can normally interpret what you're doing fairly well. So don't stress too much if you're not able to talk to us. However, most importantly, every step that you make is public. We know that your friends and family watch you, but landowners, stakeholders watch you as well. And if you are climbing over walls and fences, that does cause us problems. So please behave, because you are the ambassadors for future editions of this event. Right, I'm going to talk about emergencies and how you contact event control. So the phone number for event control is shown on the map, and we would always suggest that you try and phone us in an emergency first rather than defaulting to pressing your SOS button. pressing your SOS button, if you do that, the first thing that we will do is phone you back to see if we can understand what is going on and the nature of the emergency. So what is an emergency? So to give you some guidance, we would say any head injury is an emergency. Any collapsed runner, and that might be because they're hot, they're cold, there's a medical issue going on, that's an emergency. Chest pain, that's an emergency. And any kind of MSK injury, that could be serious as a broken bone or a sprain, that means you are no longer able to move, and I would say including hobbling painfully and slowly, we treat that as an emergency. So if an emergency occurs, phone us first or press the button of the person in peril. Generally stay put and wait for help to arrive. We will treat calls for assistance and SOS button presses incredibly seriously. Every one of them is unique, and I can't promise you that we will always do X or Y if you press that button, but we will come to your assistance. And I'd also like to say at this point that the people most likely to help you in an emergency are the participants around you. So please make every effort to attract their attention. Shouting and the whistle is so effective, particularly in poor weather. I hope that's helpful. Right, I'm just going to give a bit of an insight into how event control and our response team work. So our response team are made up of current and very experienced mountain rescue team members, and they're supported by an experienced event control team. So when you call our event control and when our response team is deployed to support you, you get a mountain rescue level response from our team. So these are a couple of pictures that you may have seen before if you've done one of my events, but they're from the 2022 edition of Cape Wrath Ultra. The pictures on the left hand side show our response team 1 going to support a runner who's actually broken their legs. They've got a lower leg fracture. This person, our participants tend to be pretty hardy, was able to hobble with some assistance down to a road and meet one of our 4x4s. The pictures with a helicopter, that is a participant who became profoundly hypothermic on day 4 and required a fairly significant intervention and hospital treatment. And then you can see Abby in event control. So you'll meet Abby at the briefing on Sunday evening, but Abby is our event control manager. She's a mountain rescue doctor. She's incredibly experienced at coordinating rescues and providing advice over the phone. All right, let's move on. I've kind of touched on the fact that the trackers are watched by everybody, so I just want to reiterate that you are our ambassadors for future events, so please don't jeopardise that. Absolute #1 request from landowners universally across the UK is to shut gates. So please never leave a gate open, even if you can see a runner 100 metres down the track who's heading for the same gate. I always want gates to be shut, so that's really, really important. Please always use stiles to cross over fences and walls, and please be respectful to anybody you meet. It is amazing how often you bump into someone out on the course and they actually turn out to be the landowner. So this happened to me a couple of days ago. I was running the new start to day 4, and I met a gentleman who turned out to be the local farmer and landowner who I'd actually never spoken to in person or face-to-face before. So that was really interesting and just proves the point. Please remember that you don't have any special right of way, so be considerate to walkers, horse riders, particular mountain bikers that you might meet. And for anyone starting early or finishing late, please be silent, not quiet, but silent when you pass people's houses, and don't shine your lights, your head torches at their windows and doors. If you happen to bump into a grumpy person, it's always better to have a conversation with them. You can give them the event control phone number if there's a problem and ask them to contact us, or we can follow up with them after the event. Right. I'm going to talk about inappropriate behaviour. So This is something we've been really focused on in the last 18 months or so at AREA events, and it is making a real difference to the experience of particularly our female participants at the event. So this photo is a great photo, and it for me it kind of sums up some of the best things about how these ad hoc groups of new friends are formed by taking part in an event. However, sometimes our female participants, and it is the females in particular, are subject to some inappropriate behaviour. I think historically this is silently tolerated, but I just want to make it really clear that it's not acceptable, and as the event director I am not going to accept inappropriate behaviour and unwanted attention. And so I'm going to give you some examples of the things that have come up over the years and have been reported to us. So a presumption that an ad hoc male-female pairing on the course should continue throughout the event, and or there's some kind of romantic intent to just polite friendship. A presumption that a lone female participant would want a male partner to run with. A presumption that it is unacceptable to leave a female participant on their own. That's especially at night. I think it's worth, just freestyling here, just reminding everybody that there's some really, really experienced female participants, and as a male you could easily be talking to someone who has got far better navigational skills than you and far more experience in the hills. You just might not know. So carrying on, presumption that, oh here we go, presumption that a female participant is less competent than a male participant, typically requiring advice with route choice and navigation. Comments, jokes, banter about how a female participant looks or dresses, for example, and this is a real example. Runner passes a male runner passes a female participant and says, "Nice legs, love." That has never happened to me. Not that my legs aren't nice, but this is the point about something that somebody will say to a female participant that's just not acceptable. So any comments, jokes, or banter of a sexual nature, including innuendo. Banter is normally not funny to people on the receiving end of it. Please be conscious about standing close to people, particularly in the start pen, and just give each other reasonable personal space. I'd also like to kind of highlight kind of sportsperson-like behaviour, and the classic one is the desperate overtaking of, let's say, our first place female finisher coming into the finish line by a male participant who's 20th. So just be mindful of the moment that runner is having and whether you might be kind of unfairly interfering with it. Another really obvious one is uninvited touching and hugging. And I think at these events there's so many friendships. This happens within the event team as well. Sometimes have gone back many, many years, and you'll see a lot of people hugging each other, and that's wonderful. But just ask yourself, do I know this person? Is it appropriate for me to, be as familiar as somebody else is? Friend or foe. So I would ask all of our participants, if you're approaching another person in the dark, just introduce yourself. Say something like, "Hey, I'm Shane, I'm also doing the Dragon's Back race." And that can take a bit of a sting out of what is potentially an intimidating situation as a head torch kind of catches you up in the dark. Certainly any of our staff on the course at night will introduce themselves in a similar way. So they might say, "Hello, this is Shane from the Dragon's Back race. Is this Jane?" So what you learn from that is who it is, that they're from the race, and that they probably should know who you are. Final bit of advice, actually just some straightforward conversation often resolves all of these problems. So if you find yourself in an ad hoc pairing, and it's the pairs that cause the problems most of all, just ask the other person, "Do you mind if we run together?" It's not a silly question to ask, but you need to be alert to the subtle response, and it might be, "I'm just going to have a break, you push on." That is a really clear indication of that participant's preference. So anyhow, I hope that's helpful. I certainly want everybody, male or female, at the event to have a wonderful time. If you have any concerns, which we would broadly call safeguarding, you can speak to anybody in one of the AREA gold uniforms. any of the medical team, or you can phone event control, and they are all briefed about how to handle these situations discreetly and appropriately. Okay, so I'm not going to labour the road point. You will be crossing lots of roads during the event. They are hazardous at times. So please take care. Be mindful that obviously the bigger, faster roads are obviously dangerous, but it's often those quiet rural lanes where locals might not be expecting you that can be quite dangerous. Be wary of overtaking vehicles. Be wary of mountain bikers and cyclists who could be silent effectively. And electrical vehicles, have to add that in there as well. And we do not want people listening to music or podcasts on headphones whilst they're on a road. So if you want to do that at other places on the course, that's fine, but not on the roads. So there is lots of water on the hills, usually. Sometimes not if it's very hot, but the point I want to make here is it's your choice if you want to drink from natural water sources during the race. It is your decision whether you treat this water or not. Generally speaking, it is reasonably safe to drink from upland streams and rivers that are away from any kind of agriculture. But it's your decision, and I would certainly recommend that you treat any water that you choose to drink. So washing at overnight camps, I'm going to highlight what the options are for you here. So Camp 1, stream. Camp 2, there's a fantastic river and swimming spot. There's also showers. Camp 3, there's a small stream. Camp 4, another fantastic river. Camp 5, a stream close by and a good river about a kilometre away, or large stream. Then Camp 6, there are no facilities at Cardiff Castle, except we have arranged with the Hilton Hotel, which is across the road, that you can pay £5, you need to pay this, temporary membership, and use their showers in their kind of health club gym if you want to do that. That's if you haven't got your own accommodation organised in Cardiff. Oh, I just want to add, of course, please, absolutely no soap, even biodegradable soap, in the rivers or streams. Thank you. Right, I'm pretty confident that not a single person comes to the Dragon's Back race planning to drop litter. If you see running related litter on the Dragon's Back route, please just assume somebody has dropped it accidentally, pick it up, do your fellow participant a favour, and certainly do us a favour as a race organiser. Really simple. Thank you for your help with that. Right, I'm now going to talk about the overnight camps. This Camp 3, and it's a fantastic location, and the overnight camps, there's always such a sense of camaraderie, and there's a great atmosphere at the overnight camps, and I certainly hope there'll be a real highlight for you at the event. So when you finish, you don't need to do anything. Your time is automatically recorded by your chip timing in your GPS tracker as you pass underneath the gantry. You'll be given splits in the download, the start-finish tent, and if you have any concerns, like you think the times are wrong, or you've got a query about did I follow the mandatory route, please raise them immediately at the finish tent with one of the team there. Your dry bag, so this is your 59-litre dry bag, will be in your tent, ready for you when you finish. And that's days 1 to 5. On day 6, they'll be laid out for collection because there is no accommodation provided. Each morning, you will need to take your big dry bag and your support point bag to be loaded into a dry bag van. However, first you need to do kit check. So kit check, then load your dry bag into the van. So whatever you do, don't leave it in the tent. The next thing is the info point. So all questions, all help, all queries to the info point, please. The info point will be in the main marquee where there'll be the kind of big tables and chairs set up for you to sit and socialise and eat your meals. At the info point, you can also collect dragon mail, you can find lost property, you can query results and timings or rules, discuss retirement options. Essentially, everything in terms of your questions goes to the info point. The blue tents. So we have invested almost £30,000 in, I can't remember, is it 60 new blue tents this year? So please be nice to them. They need to last many years. We have a few rules about the blue tents. First of all, absolutely no shoes in the tents, please. So take them off before you step into the tent. You will get the same blue tent every night. So we make sure if you're in tent 1, you get tent 1 every day. So if you treat it badly, you let it get wet, you'll just have the same stuff. If you leave rubbish lying around in the tent, that will just get rolled up and you'll find it there when you come back into the tent in the evening. The event team are specifically asked not to tidy up your mess. I guess just in terms of practical considerations, just if we have a wet event or if it has rained during the night, the tent has to be rolled up wet, so it will be wet when you come back to it during the day if it hasn't had a chance to dry. So perhaps just have a think about how you might manage a wet tent and what that means for your personal admin at the event. Catering. So you will need your own cutlery, bowls, mugs, etc. There is no disposable cutlery and bowls at the event once we get started. Please consider that no one item of food is ever unlimited. Everything needs to be cooked and prepared and served, and there's only so much capacity in the ovens and on the stoves. So very occasionally you might find that we don't have X or Y to serve when you come. That will happen at some point, and it's normally for short periods of time, 10 or 15 minutes, as we wait for something to warm through properly in the oven. It is amazing how the rumour goes through the event in minutes that we have run out of food. We have never, ever run out of food. So just please listen to what the catering team say, and if they say to you, there's no lasagna for about 10 or 15 minutes, then that means it's about 10 or 15 minutes. We have to make an estimate on how much food will be eaten. And as I said, no one item is unlimited, and we will always feed you, but we might say to you, well, there's no more lasagna. Well, the lasagna is running low and we haven't fed everybody yet. Would you like something else instead? Happens occasionally. So the sinks that we provide for drinking water, for cleaning teeth, washing hands and washing up, they are not for washing your body in, so please don't do that. Don't attempt to do that. Overnight on the campsite, please be quiet and be mindful that you're sharing the tent with potentially 8 other people who might be on very different timescales to you in terms of when they get up and when they go to sleep. So we just ask that everybody in the tent is considerate of their tent mates. In the main marquee, there is a charging station. It's really important to point out that these are USB-C chargers. So if you've got is it a Lightning, the current iPhone USB cable, that won't fit in the chargers. So you might need to bring an adapter. So what we have is USB-C charging points. If you choose to leave your device, you'll need your own cable to plug in. If you leave your device, watch your phone. It's at your own risk. So you just have to accept that. The main marquee where the charging station is manned most of the time, but not overnight. I'm not aware of any devices ever being stolen, but we've certainly had moments when another participant has picked up, an identical watch or phone in error. So you might want to put your name on things. We'd always recommend that. A bit more on catering. So, my icons jumped to the bottom of the page. Didn't expect that. So catering. So breakfast is served from 5:30 in the morning to about 8:30. There's a hot and cold breakfast. We provide finisher snacks from the first finisher until 10 p.m. Finisher snacks are soup, chips, and a collection of tray bakes and other snacking material. The main evening meal is served from 6 p.m. till 10 p.m. We do have tea and coffee, and there is milk for tea and coffee, but there is not milk for making protein shakes or having, a pint of milk. It is a splash of milk to go with the drinks. As I said before, we will always feed you. Just be mindful that no one item of food is always unlimited and is always available all the time. It's really helpful as you come into the catering tent. You look at the menu and you decide what you want before you get to the front of the queue. The compound effect of lots of tired runners getting to the front of the queue and going, I'm not sure, what can I have? It just means it's just unnecessary delays. So make a plan, and then we can kind of whiz through the peak times in the catering tent a little bit more efficiently. If you are finishing after 10 p.m, we will provide you with food, but it might be slightly different. So generally what we do is we plate up some food for you, and then it has to be microwaved when you get in. Right, I would like to introduce Dr. Natalia Kennedy, Nat. She is the medical director for the event. Nat will be leading the medical team at the event. So I am not a healthcare professional, but I have certainly learned a lot from observing how our participants and med team work over the years at the events. And I want to reiterate a couple of points over the next few slides. So first of all, the medical provision is light touch. You do not have a field hospital following the event. There is very much an emphasis on self-care. We will, of course, provide help and advice as required, and we would really ask you come to us early if you think you have a problem. I want to emphasise that the role of the med team is not to be cautious, but it's actually, i.e. kind of suggesting you should retire if you have an ache or a pain. It is to support the runners to get to the finish. As a rule of thumb, the less you see the medics, the more likely you are to be successful. It's incredibly rare to have medical retirements, and that's not something you should be worried about if you are going into the medical tent. So look after yourself first. Look after the other participants that might have a problem, particularly in your tent, so your tent mates. We would definitely ask you to try and manage simple things yourself. So the minor blisters, simple analgesia like paracetamol or antihistamines, bring these items with you. If you're stuck, you don't know what to do, you don't know how to manage a situation, please come to the medical tent. Also, please come clean. So unless it's an emergency, particularly with blistered feet, we will expect you to come to the tent having cleaned up and made yourself as little dirty as possible. Sorry, I'm tripping over my own words. As with any kind of provision of healthcare, you will be triaged. You may need to wait. So we will always prioritise the participants in greater need than you. So if you're waiting, that's a good sign, because it means you are healthier than the people in front of you. It's completely acceptable to come to the med tent and say, I need a bit of help with this blister. Can I put my name on the list? Then go and get your dinner, come back in 10 or 15 minutes, and the med team will give you an estimate. And then while somebody is looking at a blister, you can sit there and eat your chips. That's a great use of time. So things that you can anticipate. Blisters and friction. It's going to happen, and something like half of all the presentations in the medical tent relate to blisters. Please treat hot spots early, and if it means stopping and looking at your feet, potentially putting some K-tape on a hot spot, you're better off doing that immediately rather than pushing on to the next support point and then dealing with whatever's in your shoe. NSAIDs. These are non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, so we strongly advise against the use of these. Common examples would be ibuprofen, naproxen, aspirin, diclofenac. The use of these during endurance sports increases the risk of you damaging your kidneys and even your heart, and to say nothing against what they do to your gut. when you're stressed and tired and in extremis at an event. So we don't recommend them, and we certainly won't be giving them out to you at the event. So electrolyte imbalances are another thing that we like to highlight. So our advice is always to drink to thirst. So please do not come with a schedule of I am going to drink X or Y. Overhydrating, drinking too much, is dangerous, and it reduces blood sodium and potassium levels. So low blood sodium affects your brain, and low blood potassium affects your heart. It's one of the biggest killers in endurance running. So if you decide to drink from, sorry, I'm reading my own notes here. If that doesn't make sense, I'll miss that. Sorry, I'm tripping over my own words. I'll tell you what, pause, drink. Okay, let's go. So cramp is very common at the event, and it is rarely related to not having enough salt. So if you think about it, if your salt level was off, then you might well get cramp through your entire body, not a single kind of muscle. It can happen, and we, AREA, have dealt with some pretty significant electrolyte disturbances at an event, but the kind of golden rule is drink to thirst and drink electrolyte rather than water. So pain management, your endurance runners and your tolerance for pain is generally high, but we would ask that you're cautious about pushing through pain. And, you know, if you're in significant discomfort, consider whether it's the right thing to continue, and certainly come and speak to the medical team for some advice. Ticks and Lyme disease, it's generally low risk at Dragon's Back compared to Cape Wrath Ultra, and I've got a slide coming up about ticks in a moment, but so I'll go into that in a bit more detail. So blisters, we deal with a lot of blisters, and I have another slide coming up, but the thing I'd like to emphasize here is please do not use Compeed and these other like sticky plasters to go over blisters. They just cause way more problems than they solve. So let's jump forward. So blisters, here we go. We want you to take primary care of your footwear, of your foot care. So I think the questions to ask yourself if you have a blister is, how bad is it? Can I treat it myself? Do I need medical advice or treatment? If you are unsure, always come to the medical tent and we will give you advice. So in this slide, picture A, that is a blood blister, and this will make uncomfortable running, but it's not a bad blister. B is certainly going to be a painful blister, but good self-care, cleaning, padding, taping certainly would allow someone like this to continue. C, these are infected blood blisters that required hospital treatment. So in signs of infection that you should be kind of alert to is worsening pain, disproportionate pain, areas that feel hot to the touch, and redness around the wound or pus coming out of the wound. Always come to the medical tent if something like that happens. And then finally, D, these are macerated feet. These can be very sore, but they do repair pretty quickly. So certainly even overnight you can get feet like this back to like pretty good condition. So please come to the med tent with clean feet, seek advice. We may ask you to treat yourself, but we see a lot of blisters. I hope that's helpful. Right, a quick one on ticks. So ticks love warm, damp areas. So this is like your groin, backs of the knees, waistband around the tops of your trousers. Don't be shy about asking, your tent mates to have a look on your back if you think you might have a tick. Prevention is definitely better than cure. So I've found in ticky areas, long trousers and smidge on my legs really helps. Removing ticks is very easy. You can use tick tweezers to do it, but please don't burn them off. Don't put Vaseline on them or anything like that. We can do this in the med tent if you would like some help. So the two rashes you can see below, those are called bullseye rashes. They occur if the tick has Lyme disease, but they only occur about 50% of the time, and something like 3 to 30 days after a bite, often with flu-like symptoms, fatigue, muscle pain, headaches, fevers, chills, etc. If something like this happens, please ensure you go to your GP, your family doctor, explain you've had a tick bite and you're concerned about Lyme disease. Lyme disease is rare, but it is pretty serious. So the best thing you can do is remove ticks and remove them as early as possible to reduce the chances of this happening. Great. Sorry, there's a picture missing there. So finally, overnight assistance. Very occasionally people have medical emergencies during the night. If that happens, please come to the medical tent and you'll see a sign that's out overnight which has two doorbells. These are like the camera doorbells. If you press the medical emergency button, the duty medic will be woken up by their phone ringing. And you know, if this is a medical emergency, is something that can't wait until the med tent opens at about 5 a.m. If you need other kind of overnight help, so for example, perhaps the tent, an air beam within the tent has sprung a leak and it's collapsed, we'll have a duty ops person and you can call them for help as well. But if you need help in the night, come and ask for it. We won't be annoyed with you. We're nearly there. I appreciate this is a pretty long briefing. So filming and photography. So in our terms and conditions, you have given consent to be filmed. However, not everybody wants to be filmed. We understand that. So if you don't want to be filmed, just wave off the camera like that and the media team will stop filming you. What I would say is that the personal moments of people suffering or having tears are often the most memorable and generally make the cut in terms of our daily films. Drones. There's lots of permissions required for us to fly drones at the event. Whatever you do, and I can't imagine someone's going to bring a drone with them, but you absolutely cannot fly a drone anywhere on the event course or at the overnight camp, so please don't even think about it. Right, I know I've been really focused on rules and process, and I hope this has been helpful for you during the briefing. I guess final information email that will be coming out about 10 days before the event will have the details of registration times and parking. Just please read that information. But I want to return now to kind of spirit and ethos of the Dragon's Back race, and I would maybe give you some advice of understanding what your why is. And this can be a really powerful motivator when you are tired and you're in pain and you're maybe wondering whether if you can carry on and finish. So for some of you, it is that sense of adventure. It's the uncertainty. And I would actually argue that those are the moments that you're actually there for, to test yourself. Some people just want to see Wales, and what a wonderful way to run the length of a country. Some people, they want to inspire their children or their family members or their partner. That's a great motivator if that's what's driving you. But just have a think about what's motivating you to be at the Dragon's Back race. And when things get hard, and they will get hard, remind yourself of that. Right, so AREA events. We, the professional team, the employees and our volunteers, we want you to be successful. And, we're here to inspire and enable you to do extraordinary things. That's what we want out of this event. That's what we want from your Dragon's Back race experience. I haven't mentioned everything. There's a lot to think about, but hopefully this has been useful. I'm sorry this has turned into a bit of a long briefing. I kind of ad hoc following a script here. I tend to just witter on a little, but I hope that's really useful for you. Please have a read of all the guidance and information on the website. I hope the focus on rules and safety is not too draconian. I know that great events are actually created from a coherent structure and rock solid logistics and kind of that universal sense of fairness. These are like the secret foundations of a great event. At the end of the day, I am a runner like you, and I want you to have an extraordinary experience and come home full of positive memories and happy times. So have fun out there. Good luck. Enjoy the adventure, and I'll look forward to welcoming you to Conway at the end. Well, yeah, end of August. See you then.